Lithuania, a country in Eastern Europe covering 65 square kilometers with 2.8 million people. It's about the size of one of the smaller U.S. states. Basketball is by far the most popular sport. Soccer also has a strong following. Baseball is not very big there. It's mostly played on fields meant for other sports. Equipment is in short supply. Often it's used equipment donated from abroad. Yet somehow Lithuania is one of the more successful countries in European baseball, regularly beating other countries with larger populations and better baseball infrastructure. They have a well-organized league playing its 35th season this year, and they've done what so many other countries have failed to do, produce a homegrown athlete to reach the highest level of professional baseball. And the story of Lithuanian baseball from the 1920s to the 2020s is unique to this Baltic nation. Baseball's story in Lithuania begins with Steponas Darius. He was born in 1896 in Lithuania, then part of the Russian Empire. In 1907, he moved with his family to Chicago, where he grew up, and played several sports, including baseball. After serving in World War I, in which he was awarded a Purple Heart, he returned to Lithuania in 1920, which was now a newly independent country. Now back in his home country, he joined the Lithuanian army and became a pilot. He also promoted all the sports he had played in his youth and had a stadium built in Kaunas, Lithuania's second largest city. It was the first stadium of any kind in Kaunas and was later named after him. He is credited with bringing baseball and basketball to Lithuania for the first time and published books about each sport. This included translating the complete rules of baseball into Lithuanian, which must have been quite a difficult task. In 1922, he organized the first Lithuanian Baseball League. In the championship series that year, the U.S. ambassador threw out the first pitch, and a team from Kaunas won the inaugural league title. A year later, they played their first international game when a Lithuanian team beat Estonia. Baseball was also becoming a big hit in the Lithuanian immigrant community in the United States, and Steponas Darius had high hopes for the sport in his home country. On July 15, 1933, he and another Lithuanian American, Stasys Gyrinis, embarked on a flight from New York, bound for Kaunas, a difficult and dangerous journey by plane back in those days, on a plane called the Lithuanica. Before the trip, he was quoted as saying, "If I succeed in flying to Lithuania and conquer the Atlantic in Lithuania's name, my goal will be to bring Lithuanian Americans and the youth in Lithuania closer through the sport of baseball." The two men made it across the Atlantic, but on July 17th their plane went down in a forest near the border of Germany and Poland. Both men were killed, but were celebrated as national heroes. Today the two men are on the front of the 10 litas banknote, the Lithuanian currency, with the Lithuanica on the backside. After his death, there was no one left with his passion for promoting baseball, and the sport suffered as a result. Then came World War II, which made it hard for any sports to be played. And then there was Soviet rule, and baseball, seen as a sport for capitalists, was no longer allowed. While baseball may have been the favorite sport of Steponas Darius, it was the other sport he brought back to his home country, basketball, that went on to become Lithuania's national sport. In the 1980s, with baseball on its way to becoming an Olympic sport, the attitude towards it changed in communist Eastern Europe, and the Soviet Union made an aggressive push to assemble a competitive team. In 1986, baseball officially returned to Lithuania, and 3 members of the first Soviet national team were Lithuanian. In April of '87, the first USSR baseball tournament was held in Kiev. The Lithuanian team had to use a few Latvian players to fill out the roster, but interest in the sport grew after this event, and by summer they were using an all-Lithuanian roster at a tournament where they competed against teams from Latvia, Leningrad, and a team made up of Cuban students. By the end of the summer, teams were established in Lithuania, competing against one another in tournaments. In the fall, the Lithuanian Baseball Federation was established, so 1987 was truly the year that baseball was reborn in the country. In 1991, Lithuania became an independent country, and the Lithuanian national team was born. One ballplayer from the late Soviet and early independent Lithuanian days was a man named Neverauskas. He started playing the game in 1986 when it was first reintroduced. He joined a team in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, and traveled with that team to the United States to play against high school and American Legion teams. He married a woman who was a professional basketball player, and together they had a son named Darius. Born to 2 great athletes, Darius himself had a lot of athletic ability. Being born to a pro basketball player in a country where basketball was the dominant sport, it's surprising that he went with baseball, especially considering there were no baseball fields in the country at all. But that's what he did. He started playing at the age of 7, and by his early teens was throwing a fastball in the 80s. He mostly trained in Lithuania, but also attended training camps in Italy to improve his game. In 2008 and 2009, he attended the European Baseball Academy. He got the attention of Major League scouts from Arizona and Boston, who went to Vilnius to watch him throw, but it was the Pirates who signed Darius at the age of 16. From then, he spent a long time in the minors, but after 8 years and being converted from starting pitcher to relief pitcher, he made his major league debut in 2017 with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and for the season posted a .391 ERA in 24 relief appearances. From 2017 to 2020, he appeared in 76 games for the Pirates, but because of his rising ERA, the Pirates released him. Now, in 2021, he's pitching in NPB for the Hiroshima Carp, the first Lithuanian to play in both of the top 2 baseball leagues in the world. This is the story that the baseball community of every country wants to have, a homegrown athlete reaching the highest levels of professional baseball. He never lived in any other country during his childhood. He learned the game in Lithuania, did almost all of his training in Lithuania, and made it all the way to the top. Of course, the Lithuanian baseball community wants to build on this. They don't want it to be a one-off success story, and it doesn't look like it will be. At the B pool of the 2019 European Baseball Championship, the Lithuanian national team beat Romania, Slovakia, Switzerland, and Ukraine, and advanced to the best-of-3 playoff series to earn a place in the 2019 European Baseball Championship. Unfortunately, they were up against Team Israel, and they got swept in 2 games. As you probably know, Israel ended up winning the Europe-Africa qualifier and made it to the Olympics. In the WBSC World Rankings, Lithuania is number 36, just behind Guam, just ahead of Greece. They are ranked 12th out of all European countries. All the European countries ahead of Lithuania in the rankings have larger populations, higher participation numbers, and far better baseball infrastructure in their countries. The same is true for a lot of countries ranked lower than Lithuania. So considering their size and how far behind they are in baseball development, they're really overachieving. They do use a few players from the US that can claim Lithuanian citizenship, but not near as many as several other European countries use. No serious prospects right now, but they're starting to get their best young players into US high schools and colleges, hoping they can work their way up from there. Neverauskas remains involved with the game as president of the Lithuanian Baseball Association. In a country without a baseball field that meets international standards, he is the one trying to promote the game and improve the conditions. 2 years ago, when Team Lithuania had their playoff series against Israel, they had nowhere to host the series, so they prepared a stadium in the East Lithuanian city of Utena for temporary use. Vermidis was quoted as saying, "We are probably the only nation in the world that shows such results, but essentially has nowhere to play." So he's got a lot of work ahead of him, but if they can get some good fields built, better equipment, and more participation, they have the potential to become one of the stronger countries in Europe. While the country lacks a field for international play, they do maintain an organized adult baseball league, using whatever fields they can. The Lithuanian Baseball Championships, or LBL, played its first season in 1922 and was revived in 1988. All the major cities have teams. The number of teams varies year by year. In the recent past, they've played interleague games with teams from the Belarusian League. So that's baseball in Lithuania. First played there over 100 years ago, disappeared for 50 years, reintroduced in the 1980s. A few decades later, they had already produced a major league player and were becoming one of the stronger teams in Europe, yet they still don't have a proper field to play on. Maybe that'll change soon. Anyway, that's all for this one. Until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya.